I could read their lips, so I knew what they were saying. My heart hurt.
Here, get rid of her. Throw her in the trash for all I care.
I will. And then we can live our lives free of this burden.
My dad grabbed my arm and then dragged me to the car. He threw me in the back and then went back to the house and returned with my black bag full of my things. I reached for my teddy bear because I knew I'd need comfort to help me get through whatever hell they were about to force me into. As we drove, the night deepened and lightning flashed across the sky, lighting up my dad's furious face.
You put us in this situation. You forced our hand. We can't have a useless child weighing us down. Now we have a normal child. She deserves all of our attention, unlike you.
I couldn't tell him that I wasn't a burden. I couldn't explain that I was going to be something big someday.
Don't even think about trying to crawl back to us. You're a curse on any family that takes you in. Do you hear me? You made your mother miserable. But now we're going to be happy, and it will be because you're no longer there to get in our way.
We arrived outside of a gray brick building. My dad dragged me along in the rain, one hand gripping the black bag and the other holding the hood of my hoodie like I were a dog.
Good evening. Is everything okay?
Here, take it.
My father shoved and I went sprawling at the woman's feet. She looked down at me in shock.
Bye.
The matron tried to call him back, but my dad was already in his car driving away. My name is Annie. I'm 25 years old, and currently the face of several campaigns to increase accessibility around the world. Right now, I'm one of the most successful people in my generation. 20 years ago, it was a different story. Growing up, things were difficult. I was born with a rare disorder that left me deaf. The doctors assured my parents that it was the best-case scenario, and that anything worse was mitigated by fast-acting doctors. I could have died or been blind. Deafness was a disability, but it wouldn't destroy me. It would just make life a little less accessible. For my parents, it was basically a death sentence. They held me in their arms at the hospital and sneered down at me.
What the heck are we supposed to do with a deaf baby?
Teach it sign language? I don't know. How am I supposed to find time to learn sign language myself?
No one can blame us if we're too busy to learn a whole new language.
Exactly, it's too much work.
And so started the first 6 years of my life. I never had much communication with anyone. They didn't take me outside if they could help it, and when they did, they told people I was just spoiled, instead of deaf, and that's why I didn't respond to them. My earliest memories are of being completely ignored. The moment I could hold a bottle on my own, I was basically left to my own devices. I taught myself to use the bathroom, played games by myself, learned to read. That last one was hard, but I was determined. I had no way to put sounds to letters, but I used the internet to see what people's mouths did when they said words, and I slowly managed to make connections in my head about the words I was reading and the mouth shape. If my parents had been paying attention, they would have noticed from an early age that I was showing signs of genius.
What's all this mess?
That girl, she's left books everywhere. What is she trying to do? Read?
Ha ha ha. As if she could. She's deaf and useless. I don't want her putting her grubby hands all over all of my stuff.
Let's move it somewhere higher. And while we're at it, we could move her out to the rubbish tip.
Ha 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 ha.
Without access to books, I relied on the tablet they had thrown at me one day. I learned sign language, and while my parents were at work, I took online classes for deaf people. By the time I was 6, I could read at a 6th grade level and do mathematics. Most elementary school children wouldn't even dream of attempting.
Annie, you are amazing. You're a real little genius. Your parents must be so proud.
Yes, very proud.
I will post your certificate through today. You should be able to show it to your elementary school. When you eventually enroll, they should let you skip a few grades. Isn't that exciting?
Sure. Actually, I was very scared of going to school. The only person I had ever talked to was my online teacher, and she was very nice. But the other 2 people I knew were my mom and dad, and they weren't very nice at all. The next week, I got my certificate. It was proof that I was a genius child, and that I wasn't going to be left behind by life because of my disability. I was excited to show my parents, but in those months that I was studying and working hard, I had missed something important. My mom had been pregnant. They had started to fill my room with baby clothes and toys. One day, I went into my room and discovered all of my things in a black bag and a crib where my bed was. Then, on the day I got my certificate, my mom came home with a baby.
Oh, she's still here.
I forgot all about her. Oops.
I could read their lips, so I knew what they were saying. My heart hurt.
Here, get rid of her. Throw her in the trash for all I care.
I will. And then we can live our lives free of this burden.
My dad grabbed my arm and then dragged me to the car. He threw me in the back and then went back to the house and returned with my black bag full of my things. I reached for my teddy bear because I knew I'd need comfort to help me get through whatever hell they were about to force me into. As we drove, the night deepened and lightning flashed across the sky, lighting up my dad's furious face.
You put us in this situation. You forced our hand. We can't have a useless child weighing us down. Now we have a normal child. She deserves all of our attention, unlike you.
I couldn't tell him that I wasn't a burden. I couldn't explain that I was going to be something big someday.
Don't even think about trying to crawl back to us. You're a curse on any family that takes you in. Do you hear me? You made your mother miserable. But now we're going to be happy, and it will be because you're no longer there to get in our way.
We arrived outside of a gray brick building. My dad dragged me along in the rain, one hand gripping the black bag and the other holding the hood of my hoodie like I were a dog.
Good evening. Is everything okay?
Here, take it.
My father shoved and I went sprawling at the woman's feet. She looked down at me in shock.
Bye.
The matron tried to call him back, but my dad was already in his car driving away. She looked down at me again and sighed.
Come on up then. Let's call the police.
I took her hand, and when she helped me dry off and asking me about myself, she realized something.
My goodness, dear, are you deaf?
I nodded, but I showed her my certificate. She smiled at me.
You must be very smart.
The police came, but my certificate only had my first name, and I couldn't tell them my second because I didn't have one. My parents never got me registered. I never went to school or to the doctor. My new life was a complicated one. The other kids were fine but confused. They'd never met a deaf person before. The local parish came in thrice a week to give sign language classes, and by the time I was 7, I could hold a conversation with people. I went to school. I worked hard. I kept an eye on my parents' social media. Over the years, I watched their daughter grow up, and I was left in the system. I was fortunate, though. I was given opportunities to grow and helped to apply for funds to help pay my way through school. At 15, I graduated college. At 21, I was the head of a giant business that dealt in medical-grade equipment made to help make people's lives easier. By this age, my little sister was 15 and doing fine. I reached out to her the year before and set up a college fund to be given to her when she applied, so long as she was also told about what our parents did. Unfortunately, those college years never came. My sister died in a hit-and-run the day after her sweet 16th.
Ashley was a gentle soul who worked hard and cared for everyone. We're very sad about her passing, and the family would like to thank the anonymous donor who paid for the service.
I watched from a distance and saw my parents, who I had last seen the day I was abandoned. I felt that enough time had passed that they might have felt guilty about what they did. Perhaps they had been young and unaware. I walked up to them at the end of the funeral. One of my inventions was a sign-to-speech translator, but it was a little impersonal, so I used my super hearing aid to help. My voice was still a little slurred, but I knew I was understandable. I'm sorry about Ashley.
What's wrong with your voice?
I'm deaf.
We used to know a girl who was deaf. She should have been the one to die, not our precious Ashley. Annie was a waste of space and curse. Look what that curse brought on us. She was a freak.
I wasn't a curse, and if you'd stuck around long enough to realize that, then you would have realized that. I looked around at the funeral, at the photos on the wall, and remembered the images I'd seen online. My parents had fabricated this perfect life. Mom was on the PTA, Dad was on a bowling league, Ashley was a cheerleader. They looked normal. I wasn't a curse. You abandoned me, left me on a doorstep like garbage. You told me I was worthless, and yet, here I am. Successful, thriving, and more powerful than you could ever imagine.
Who is she?
Did they really abandon their own daughter?
I thought they only had Ashley.
The whispers became a hum, then a roar. The illusion my parents had built of being a perfect, grieving family began to crumble before their eyes. My mother reached for my father's arm, eyes darting around in panic.
You need to leave, now.
I shook my head, taking a step forward. No, I think I'll stay. After all, I paid for this funeral. I hope the ceremony was to your liking. I wanted Ashley to have the farewell she deserved.
Thank you for paying. It was beautiful. Ashley mentioned you.
My parents stiffened. Her mother's lips curled in disdain.
You paid for this? Why?
Because despite everything, I wanted Ashley to have a proper goodbye. Unlike you, I actually cared about her future. My father's face was turning red, his fists clenching at his sides.
You think you can come here, throwing around your money, pretending like you care, after everything you put us through?
After everything I put you through, you abandoned me at 6 years old in the pouring rain with nothing but a black trash bag of my things. You called me a curse, and then you had the audacity to go on and have another child, only to lose her in the end. It must feel awful to lose a child. I wouldn't know, but you do. Twice now. My mother gasped in horror, her hand flying to her chest as though she had been physically struck. The murmurs grew louder. People were no longer whispering. They were openly talking.
Did you hear that? They really did abandon her. How could they do something like that to their own child?
I knew there had been another kid. They told me they'd aborted her.
I watched as my parents' world collapsed around them. I had waited for this moment for nearly 2 decades. The ultimate revenge was not violence, not screaming, not hatred, but public humiliation and the truth being laid bare for all to see. My father took a step toward, his voice low and shaking with fury.
Get out.
Gladly. But before I go, I just wanted to let you know, I own your house.
What?
Oh, did you not check the fine print when you refinanced your mortgage? I bought out your debt years ago. Thought I'd let you stay for a while, out of pity. But now I think it's time for you to leave. This is your official eviction notice. You have 30 days. I suggest you start packing. My parents' faces drained of all color. The humiliation was complete. I turned and walked away, my head held high, stepping out of the cemetery as my parents were left behind to drown in the mess they had made. That was my final revenge, and it was sweeter than I ever imagined. 30 days later, I sent my security guards to kick my parents out, and they did. I filmed a video and posted it. My parents were humiliated in the video as they pick up their belongings under the snow. My parents are now renting a cramped 1-bedroom house and living with 3 cats. Serves them right. Thanks for watching.